In February 2025, an independent documentary team was granted temporary access to a government storage facility containing thousands of archived recordings from scientific expeditions conducted throughout Antarctica during the Cold War. Most of the material had already been declassified. Boxes filled with maintenance logs, weather reports, engineering footage, and damaged magnetic tapes had remained untouched for decades. Among them was a single VHS cassette without a title. Only one handwritten label remained: Station Echo 9, no country. No date. No expedition number. Nothing else. The tape had suffered severe magnetic damage after years in storage. Large portions of the recording were filled with static, tracking errors, and missing frames. Digital restoration specialists estimated that almost 40% of the original footage had already been lost forever. The remaining 60% was recovered. The recording began with complete darkness. Several seconds later, the image stabilized. A timestamp appeared in the lower corner. July 18th, 1987. Snow drifted across the camera lens as a man adjusted the thermal imaging unit mounted on a heavy tripod. A voice spoke quietly through heavy radio interference. "Thermal system online." Another voice answered, "Begin perimeter sweep." The operator slowly rotated the camera across the frozen landscape surrounding Station Echo 9. Nothing appeared unusual. The buildings were completely dark. Metal walls blended into the freezing environment. The surrounding ice reflected almost no heat. Exactly what the team expected. The station had supposedly been abandoned weeks earlier after a severe equipment failure. No personnel were scheduled to remain on site. The operator continued scanning. Storage buildings. Fuel tanks. Communication towers. Every structure appeared almost identical in temperature. Then the camera stopped. Near the western maintenance corridor, a faint white shape appeared against the freezing background. It lasted less than 2 seconds. The operator immediately lowered the camera. He looked directly toward the corridor. Nothing was there. He raised the thermal camera again. The shape had disappeared. One of the researchers laughed. Probably a reflection. The sweep continued. 3 minutes later, the shape returned. This time it remained visible for nearly 5 seconds. It stood perfectly still inside the empty corridor connecting to abandoned buildings. Again, the operator lowered the camera. Again, nothing could be seen with the naked eye. The thermal image revealed a heat signature. The normal camera revealed only blowing snow. The operator checked the instrument's calibration. Everything appeared normal. Ambient temperature, internal sensor status, battery voltage, all within expected operating limits. He restarted the thermal system and repeated the scan from the beginning. When the camera reached the same corridor, the heat signature was waiting in exactly the same place. No movement. No visible source. Just a perfectly defined shape standing where no living person should have been. The operator whispered something barely audible. "I don't think we're alone." The recording continued. The footage immediately attracted the attention of imaging specialists. Their first conclusion was simple. The thermal camera had malfunctioned. Early thermal imaging systems were far less reliable than modern equipment. Extreme cold often produced unstable readings. Electronic drift, sensor blooming, false heat signatures. Every one of those explanations seemed more likely than an unknown object standing outside an abandoned Antarctic station. The original recording was sent to a military imaging laboratory for verification. Every frame was stabilized. Digital noise was removed. Sensor calibration data embedded within the recording was extracted and reconstructed. The laboratory reached an unexpected conclusion. The thermal camera had been operating perfectly. Its internal calibration remained within acceptable limits throughout the entire recording. Nothing suggested hardware failure. One engineer proposed another possibility. Perhaps the camera had reflected heat from the operator himself. The theory lasted less than an hour. The angle made that physically impossible. The camera was facing away from the team. No reflective surface existed inside the corridor. The signature could not have originated from anyone standing behind the equipment. Attention shifted toward the station itself. Perhaps an emergency generator had somehow restarted. Maintenance blueprints were retrieved from the archive. Station Echo 9 had been designed with 3 independent power systems. All 3 had been permanently shut down 16 days before the recording was made. Fuel reserves had already been removed. Electrical cables had been disconnected. Even if someone had attempted to restart the station, there was no available power source. Yet the thermal image continued to show something emitting heat. The investigation expanded. Another storage box was recovered from the archive. Inside were 2 additional videotapes recorded during the same expedition. Unlike the first tape, these had never been digitized. After restoration, the investigators discovered they had been recorded by 2 separate thermal cameras positioned on opposite sides of the station. Each camera covered a different section of the perimeter. The laboratory synchronized all 3 recordings using their original timestamps. The result changed the investigation forever. At exactly 2:14 in the morning, every camera detected the same heat source, not from the same angle. Not from the same position. The object appeared simultaneously on all 3 systems. Camera 1 showed it standing inside the maintenance corridor. Each camera covered a different section of the perimeter. The laboratory synchronized all 3 recordings using their original timestamps. The result changed the investigation forever. At exactly 2:14 in the morning, every camera detected the same heat source, not from the same angle. Not from the same position. The object appeared simultaneously on all 3 systems. Camera 1 showed it standing inside the maintenance corridor. Camera 2 detected the same heat signature through a narrow service passage leading toward the communications building. Camera 3 recorded only the upper portion of the figure disappearing behind an exterior fuel storage wall. Each camera observed a different perspective. Together, they confirmed something impossible. The heat signature occupied real physical space. It was not a sensor error. It was not video corruption. 3 independent thermal cameras had recorded the same object at the same time. The engineering team immediately requested the standard video captured alongside the thermal recordings. If something had truly been standing outside the station, the conventional cameras should have seen it as well. The standard footage arrived later that afternoon. Frame by frame, investigators compared both recordings. The thermal cameras displayed a bright human-shaped figure moving slowly across the station. The standard cameras showed only empty snow drifting through abandoned corridors, nothing else. The recordings remained perfectly synchronized. Where the thermal image displayed movement, The normal cameras displayed absolutely nothing. No shadow. No reflection. No distortion. Only empty Antarctica. One sentence appeared in the laboratory summary. Heat source confirmed. Visual confirmation unavailable. No one inside the review team could explain how that was possible. The mystery had only begun. Once the thermal recordings had been verified, investigators turned their attention to the station's written records. Every Antarctic research station maintained a daily operations log. Weather conditions, equipment failures, fuel consumption, personnel movements, every significant event was documented. The archive from Station Echo 9 was almost complete. Only 1 week was missing. The missing pages covered the exact period during which the thermal recordings had been captured. At first, archivists believed the documents had simply been lost. A second inventory proved otherwise. Someone had deliberately removed them. The page numbers remained consecutive. The binding showed signs that several sheets had been cut out with a blade rather than torn by accident. One document, however, survived. It was not part of the official log. It was a handwritten notebook belonging to the station's chief electrical engineer. Most of its entries described routine maintenance, replacing frozen valves, repairing damaged antennas, inspecting backup generators, nothing unusual. 3 days before the station was evacuated, the notes changed completely. The engineer stopped writing about equipment. He started writing about the thermal cameras. The first entry read, Camera 1 detected an unidentified heat source near the western corridor. No visual confirmation. The following day's entry became even shorter. Same location, same temperature, no explanation. The final note filled an entire page. According to the engineer, the team decided to inspect the corridor during daylight. For researchers walked the exact route where the thermal signature had appeared the previous night. They photographed every wall, measured every surface, collected snow samples. Nothing unusual was found. No animal tracks. No footprints. No exposed pipes. No hidden electrical cables. The ground temperature matched every surrounding area. The location appeared completely ordinary. That evening, they repeated the thermal scan. The heat signature returned. This time it was no longer standing still. The object moved slowly along the corridor before disappearing behind the communications building. The engineer described what happened next in a single sentence. It stopped moving the moment we opened the station door. The investigation team assumed the engineer meant the signal had disappeared. The original thermal recording proved otherwise. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed that the heat signature had not vanished. It had simply become motionless, as if it had noticed the station door opening. The engineering notebook ended with one final observation. The words were written in larger handwriting than the rest of the journal. The pressure of the pen had almost torn through the paper. It only moves when nobody is outside. There were no additional entries. No explanation. No signature. No indication of what happened after that night. Station Echo 9 was officially abandoned 48 hours later. The evacuation report listed only one reason: critical infrastructure failure. No mention of thermal anomalies. No mention of unidentified heat signatures. No mention of the handwritten notebook. The official record ended there. The recovered archive did not. The investigation remained classified for decades. Station Echo 9 slowly disappeared from public records. The buildings were eventually buried beneath layers of drifting snow, and satellite imagery became the only practical way to monitor the site. Nothing unusual was reported again, at least officially. In January 2024, an international climate survey selected the abandoned station as a temporary research location. The objective had nothing to do with the events recorded in 1987. Scientists wanted to measure long-term ice movement and inspect the structural condition of several abandoned facilities before they collapsed completely. The original thermal recordings were unknown to the expedition. The team arrived by helicopter shortly after sunrise. Weather conditions were stable. Visibility exceeded 12 kilometers. Surface temperature measured -42 degrees Celsius. The station appeared exactly as expected. Broken windows, collapsed antennas, snow filling the lower corridors. Nothing suggested that anyone had entered the facility for decades. The first day passed without incident. Researchers installed weather instruments, photographed the exterior, and completed structural inspections before returning to temporary shelters established several hundred meters away. The thermal cameras remained packed inside their equipment cases. They were intended for wildlife observation during the following week. Everything changed on the second night. One researcher noticed unusual battery drain affecting multiple outdoor temperature sensors. The instruments continued operating normally, but their batteries discharged almost twice as fast as predicted. The engineering team suspected extreme cold had damaged the battery packs. Replacement units produced exactly the same result. To identify the source of the problem, one technician deployed a handheld thermal camera around the station. The survey began as a routine equipment inspection. External generators appeared cold. Fuel storage remained frozen. Power systems showed no residual heat. As the operator reached the western maintenance corridor, he stopped walking. A narrow vertical heat signature appeared at the far end of the passage. The camera displayed a temperature several degrees above the surrounding environment. The technician lowered the thermal camera. The corridor was empty. He raised the camera again. The heat signature remained exactly where it had been seconds earlier. Believing the device had malfunctioned, he switched to a second thermal camera stored inside the equipment vehicle. The image returned immediately. Same location, same temperature, same shape. The technician called to other members of the expedition. Each carried independent equipment manufactured by different companies. All three thermal cameras displayed the same heat signature. None of the standard cameras recorded anything unusual. The lead engineer requested the archived coordinates from the original station blueprints to verify the location. Within minutes, the comparison was complete. The modern expedition had stopped in exactly the same corridor described in the handwritten notebook from 1987. No one on the team had read those documents before arriving in Antarctica. They had unknowingly positioned themselves at the same location where the unexplained heat source had first been recorded nearly 4 decades earlier. For the first time since the original investigation, 2 independent expeditions had documented the same unexplained phenomenon, separated by 37 years, using completely different equipment. At that moment, the question was no longer whether the thermal recordings from 1987 had been authentic. The question became far more difficult. Why was the same heat signature still there after all those years? The expedition leader ordered every thermal camera to continue recording throughout the night. No one approached the corridor. No one entered the abandoned station. The objective was simple. Observe, record, do not interfere. The cameras operated continuously for nearly 6 hours. Nothing happened. At 2:17, one of the operators noticed movement. Not on the ground. Inside the thermal image itself. The heat signature had changed position. It was no longer standing at the end of the corridor. It had moved approximately 6 meters closer to the station entrance. The operator checked the team as he replayed the previous 5 minutes. The movement had never been captured. One frame showed the figure in its original position. The next frame showed it several meters closer. There were no intermediate steps. No walking motion. No visible transition. The object simply occupied a different location. The recording continued. At 2:41, the same thing happened again. Another sudden change. Another 6 meters. Still no visible movement. Only a new position. The lead engineer suggested calculating the distance, using measurements from the original station blueprints. The team estimated that the heat signature now stood less than 15 meters from the main entrance. No one spoke. Every person inside the observation shelter understood the same fact. If the pattern continued, the next position would place the object directly outside the building. The cameras remained fixed on the corridor. At exactly 3:06, every thermal display froze for less than 1 second. The power never failed. The recording never stopped. The image simply paused. When it returned, the corridor was empty. The heat signature had disappeared. Relief spread through the room. Several members of the expedition assumed the phenomenon had finally ended. Then one technician looked toward a different monitor. Camera 4 had not been aimed at the corridor. It had been pointed at the station entrance the entire night. The heat signature had not vanished. It had appeared directly in front of the main door, less than 1 meter away. The standard security camera recorded nothing. The thermal camera displayed a perfectly defined human-shaped figure standing motionless outside the entrance. No footprints surrounded it. No body blocked the falling snow. Only the thermal image showed its presence. The operator slowly zoomed in. The temperature reading remained impossible, while the surrounding air measured -43 degrees Celsius. The unidentified object emitted a constant surface temperature of 36.6, exactly the average temperature of a healthy human body. No one opened the door. The expedition leader immediately ordered the entire team to prepare for evacuation before sunrise. The thermal camera continued recording until the helicopters arrived. During the final 12 minutes, the heat signature never moved. It simply remained outside the station, as if it were waiting for someone inside to make the first move. The evacuation began at 6:40 the following morning. The research team left Station Echo 9 exactly as they had found it. Every instrument was powered down. Every storage container was sealed. Every entrance was locked before the helicopters departed. The thermal cameras were never recovered. Their internal batteries had been left running to preserve the final hours of environmental data. The station disappeared beneath the horizon. The investigation appeared to be over. 3 weeks later, the equipment was retrieved during a scheduled supply flight. The memory cards contained more than 12 hours of uninterrupted footage. Most of it showed nothing: empty corridors, blowing snow. Falling temperatures, exactly what investigators expected. Then the analysts reached the final recording. It had begun automatically at 4:12. No researchers remained at the station. The building was completely empty. The thermal camera faced the main entrance. For nearly 8 minutes, nothing changed. The doorway remained closed. The snow drifted across the frozen ground. At 4:20, the door opened. Slowly. No person appeared. No movement was visible on the standard security camera. The thermal recording showed only the open doorway. The camera continued recording. 30-7 seconds passed. Then, for the first and only time, the unidentified heat signature crossed the entrance. It did not emerge from outside. It appeared to move from inside the station toward the snow-covered landscape. The figure never looked toward the camera. It never stopped. Within seconds, it disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of the thermal lens. The standard video captured nothing except an open door moving in the wind. Investigators searched the area surrounding the station. No footprints. No equipment. No signs that anyone had entered or left the building. The snow around the entrance remained completely undisturbed. The footage was reviewed by specialists from 3 independent laboratories. Each confirmed the same conclusion. The thermal recording had not been manipulated. No evidence of digital editing could be found. The investigation was closed 6 months later. Its final report consisted of only 2 pages. The conclusion contained a single sentence. The source of the recorded thermal anomaly could not be identified. Station Echo 9 has never been occupied again. Today, the buildings remain buried beneath Antarctic snow. Satellite images still show the outlines of the abandoned structures. No official expedition has returned to the site. Whether that decision was made for safety, budget, or some other reason has never been publicly explained. The recovered thermal recording remains one of the few pieces of evidence that survived the archive. It offers no answers, only one question. If the station was truly empty, what opened the door?